On this episode of the Adapted Lens podcast, we welcome award-winning photographer and Canon Explorer of Light, Rick Sammon. So for those of you who don't know, Rick, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm stuck inside like everybody, almost everyone else on the planet right now. We're recording this. I'm in New York, about an hour north of New York City. So stuck inside, but I've never been busier. I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of photography around the house. In the backyard, we actually live on a pond, but I don't know if you could see, I have a bass guitar in the back. I have a regular guitar, acoustic and electric. So I've never bored.
Well, that's pretty good. I have a 1-year-old son, so I'm never bored either.
Well, I have some advice for you, my friend. Don't blink, because my son's 29 and I blinked and he's 29.
It's been unbelievable. So tell me, you began your photography career as an underwater photographer. How in the world did you get involved in such a photographic niche?
Well, it's a long story. To make a long story short, I was in the right place at the right time where I was not a scuba diver and not an underwater photographer. And I met someone who needed an underwater photographer and a writer to be the editor of a newsletter, scuba diving and conservation newsletter. So he said, "You want the job?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, all you have to do is learn how to dive and learn how to take underwater pictures." So I took a class, and a month later, I'm in Belize, Central America, scuba diving and documenting this archaeology work on a Spanish shipwreck off Ambergris Key in Belize, Central America.
And so how did you make the jump from doing such a specialized form of photography into doing so many other things?
Well, after doing this for 20 years, all I did for 20 years was take underwater pictures and write about the underwater environment and marine conservation. And I made the jump because I didn't need another picture of a clownfish. I had 20,000 slides, and it was enough. But what the real thing is, the scuba diving took me to places like Lombok, Indonesia, and Fiji, and Thailand, and the Maldives, and all these amazing places around the planet where I met these, interesting people, and I learned so much from their cultures. What's important to us, taking the virus out of the situation, we're checking our emails, right? We're instant messaging, we're doing all this stuff. A lot of these places where people their main goal is to stay alive and to find food for the next day. And then I got involved in, I'm not a Buddhist, but I love the Buddhist culture. So I encountered a lot of that in Southeast Asia. So I fell in love with documenting the cultures of the people and realized how satisfying and therapeutic photography is for me. So I really got into doing this. So to answer your original question, now after doing this for so long, I have 40 books, 41's coming out in May of 2020. And so I just love writing. I love taking pictures. I love sharing. I love teaching. I have 18 classes on Kelby 1. So I'm busy.
Sounds like it. So this podcast is a lot about adapting to changes. As photographers, we are always adapting, sometimes to good circumstances, sometimes to not so good circumstances like coronavirus. So tell me a little bit about being a photographer and a field trip leader and educator in the time of coronavirus.
Yeah, well, I'm not a field trip leader right now. No one's leading workshops, but fortunately, I have a lot of good things going. I have a lot of books. I have the classes. So a lot of the training, a lot of the workshops basically have gone online. And so you have to look good on camera, you have to sound good on camera, you have to have good lights, you have to have good material, you have to know your material. So online training, and my son who's getting his PhD, by the way, he's 29, as I said,
wow,
in finance at Northwestern Kellogg, he's doing online training. So my advice to people listening in, that if you want to do virtual workshops, learn about online training, learn how to be good on that.
That's very apt. And I think it's going to stay that way even after the coronavirus has passed.
Well, that's what he's thinking. He was going to get a job and teach at wherever he wanted to teach, Stanford, but I think it's going to be online. And there's so much online already now. So what's going to separate someone? And I think, because people ask me all the time, everybody knows about the exposure triangle, right? And what a 200 millimeter lens can do and what a macro lens can do. But what's going to separate people is your personality. And people are going to come to you for your personality and really how you deliver that message. It's not really the message so much. Everyone says the same. Not everyone says the same thing, but a lot of people say the same thing. And one piece of advice I would give people if they haven't taken it would be to take the Dale Carnegie course. And one of the things about the Dale Carnegie course is that they talk about enthusiasm, that you have to have enthusiasm. So if I'm talking about, I'm taking some pictures in Antarctica, I could say, I took this picture of these 4 penguins and I liked their gesture, and, there was separation and the background was nice and I love the blue ice. Or I could say, I had an amazing experience. These penguins were together for only, a couple of minutes, but the way they interacted and the gesture, and in wildlife photography, gesture is everything. And the movement of the wings and their face position, and we moved the boat around so we were in exactly the right position. So anyway, there's a big difference between, just communicating with enthusiasm.
That takes me way back to college. Is it the medium or the message?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So on a little bit of a lighter note, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, 41 books. How on earth? I have a hard time writing a Facebook post. Never mind 41 books. That's amazing.
I type fast. Well, I tell everyone that, but some people have, I guess, a knack for doing things. But I figured out early on that for 39 of the books, my books are basically pictures and captions. So, getting back to Antarctica, I might start with a picture of the penguins, right, and write a long caption for it. Then I might put a picture of ice in there and write something about that. And then I might put a picture of the weather in there, right? So organizing a book with pictures and captions is very, very easy to do. So all those 39 books are basically pictures and captions. However, my latest book, Phototherapy, is 35,000 words and no pictures. And surprisingly, and this is really surprising, that is my best-selling book ever.
That's awesome. So tell me, how do you get inspired? Is it just with your experiences? Because it's such a visual medium, especially to write a book on photography that doesn't have any pictures. It's got to be really tough.
Well, I figured after 39 books, maybe people didn't need to see another Rick Sound picture. But I thought, I wanted people to slow down. And A, and B, I didn't want, I do have some amazing pictures from Antarctica and Africa and being in the right place at the right time, Alaska, bald eagles. I have all these pictures, but I didn't want people to get distracted by looking at the pictures and saying, oh, I wish I was in Antarctica, took that picture. I wish I was on an African safari. So the message of this book, Phototherapy, is really on what does your photography mean to you? And it's really more about why you take pictures than how you take pictures. Again, anyone can tell you how to take a picture, right? Okay, you're on African safari. Use a long lens, use a wide aperture. If the background's distracting, to blur the background, use a fast shutter speed. But I wanted to talk about, capturing the feeling and the mood, because in a picture, in a painting, in a song, the most important thing is the mood. It's the feeling. It's the emotion. So I really wanted people to think hard about what their photography means to them. And I got this idea actually on a workshop. We were sitting around the campfire once, and I just said to someone, what does your photography mean to you? And we went around the campfire, and by the end of it, honestly, a couple of people were crying because they were saying, my life would be so empty. Or some people said, it saved my life, right? Or, it gives me an outlet, or it helps me be connected. So photography really is, anyone who's been in psychotherapy like myself knows how important psychotherapy is. And I got the idea, by the way, I was on Twitter, and someone published a book called Bird Therapy. and how therapeutic it is to watch birds. And I'm sure you've heard that, like in nursing homes, they have aquariums because it's very therapeutic for the people in the nursing homes to watch the fishes swim around. So as soon as I saw bird therapy, I said I have to do phototherapy.
Especially, I'm a photographer, but I'm also an avid birder. I'm actually the president of our Audubon chapter here in Flagler County.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, and I definitely get it. I'm also a musician, so all three are very helpful.
Oh, well, we have to get together sometime.
I'd love that. Absolutely.
What do you play?
Drums. So I'm not really a musician.
Oh, you are. Did you see recently that it was on 2 nights ago where they had the Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney? You know what I'm talking about, that event,
yes.
Right? Taylor Swift was on. Anyway, for the listeners, there was this, it wasn't a live event, but it was a global event. And CNN carried it, MSNBC, and they had all these musicians and entertainers trying to give encouragement to people. But speaking of drummers not being musicians, Charlie Watts, the drummer from the Rolling Stones, he was playing like the air drums, right? He didn't have drums.
Poor Charlie Watt.
Well, and I will be serious for 1 second. I have a bass back there. The key to any band is the bass and the drums.
I know. I take solace in that for sure.
No, it really is. Really is true. And another thing I talk about in the book, talk about the Rolling Stones. One of the first songs I ever learned was Satisfaction. Dan dan dan. Those 3 notes, right? Mm-hmm. So I tried to emulate that when I was like 17. So today, I think a form of phototherapy, and a lot of people are doing this. I have a chapter in the book. It's called Steal Like an Artist. And there is actually a book called Steal Like an Artist. It was numbered by Ashton Kutcher, I think is his name. It was a #1 seller on the New York Times book list. And he talks about stealing like an artist, that, try to copy, the work of great artists. And it starts out with a quote by Salvador Dali, and the quote is, those who do not imitate anything produce nothing.
Yeah.
So I encourage people, look at like Vermeer's painting, The Girl with the Pearl Earring. So in the studio behind me here, I simulated that, and now a lot of people are doing that. I simulated Renoir's Girl Combing Her Hair, and Rembrandt's Soldier with a Feather in His Cap. So stealing like an artist and looking at the work of other people can be very therapeutic, and that's how we grow. And that's one of the goals of psychotherapy, to grow and understand yourself. And I think with phototherapy, the more you get into it, especially in these times when we're alone, if we look at our pictures, the Buddhists say, learning is health. And, we could sit around and feel sorry for ourselves, and I do sometimes. Like last night, I wasn't feeling that good. But there's one of my favorite quotes is, you don't drown by falling in water. You only drown if you stay there.
That's a really good quote. I love that.
It's by Bruce Barton. And I love that quote. And it's true. Like we could, and it's easy for me to say now because I'm feeling okay. But I've had, I'm sure a lot of your listeners, ups and downs during this. This is like, no one ever thought in a million years we'd be doing this, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a different April than we all thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And probably a very different May and June and so on.
I think year.
Yeah.
And I feel, all the photographers, they have this equipment, they want to go out. They were planning on going to, on safari or going to the national parks. Can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I think it's smart not to go anywhere right now.
I just started my photography business in November, and so all my plans are vaporized right now. But on the other hand, it does give a good time to talk to photographers like yourself and others who are sort of going through a very shared experience. It's kind of a unique opportunity to globally share an experience.
Well, we are sharing this. We are all in this together. But, I'm 70 next month, a little older than you.
That is true.
probably old enough to be a dad. But my advice to younger people is, invest wisely. And if you invest wisely, then when something like this happens, you're set. I used to work in an advertising agency, and I hated it. And I worked there from age 30 to 40. And at age 35, I wanted to get out. So for 5 years, I saved, invested as much as I possibly could. So I had what my accountant calls a cushion that would carry me through. So investing wisely is so important. Never live above your means. I know people a friend of mine had to sell his house recently.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Tough, very tough.
Yeah.
So I know you touched on it a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about how being a musician has influenced your photography, and probably a little bit the other way around too.
Yeah, well, first of all, like, you're a musician, you're a photographer. Ansel Adams, musician, photographer. Scott Kelby, musician, photographer. Frank Dorhoff. We could go down the list, right? And people who love photography, like Elton John, has an amazing collection of photographs. Graham Nash,
Yeah.
right? From Crosby, Stills, and Nash, a wonderful black and white photographer. He used to have a lab called, it may be still around, Nash Editions. I'm not sure. But I think, it's very interesting. I think people who are good at one thing are usually good at a lot of things. So people who are good at music are probably good at photography or good at creating. And, I think we all, musicians and photographers and artists and painters and sculptors, I think and cavemen who used to put, their fingerprints and do paintings on the wall. I think we all have a need to express ourselves. And it's interesting. So I just said that people who are good at one thing are usually good at a lot of things. So I had this discussion with my son. And my next book is called Photo Quest. And that's coming out in May. Again, now this is 55,000 words and no pictures. And I have an amazing team of all-star mentors. Karen Hutton's in there. Scott Kelby's in there. I could go down the list. Sean Bagshaw, Ian Plant, all these young, talented photographers. But I have a chapter in there generated by a conversation I have with my son about our superpower. So Ansel Adams, he was a concert pianist and a great photographer. So what's his superpower? Taking photography and music out of it, what was Ansel Adams' superpower? So I can't answer for him, but it might have been an attention to a detail, right? Or an attention for understanding a mood and a feeling. So I have a whole chapter in this. I don't want to give too much away, and I asked all these famous photographers, what do they think their superpower is?
I love that. That's a really cool way of thinking about it.
Well, it's not an original idea, my son winds up telling me. But if you do a search on your superpowers, you'll find out what your... Well, the whole point of the book is to ask yourself the question, what is your superpower, right? A great actor, you could look at a great actor on TV, whoever your favorite actor may be, he or she, it doesn't matter. But you may look at that and say, I can't believe they remembered their lines for that scene that lasted, 18 minutes. And I can't believe they cried. And I can't believe the emotion when 37 people were around them with mics and lights and eating sandwiches and stuff like that. So their superpower isn't that they could remember a line. Their superpower isn't that, they could, not pay attention to the guy eating the sandwich or the woman eating the sandwich at the food truck. It's something else. So I really, again, I don't want to give it away, but I think for your listeners, if they ask themselves what their superpower is, and a lot of it, just one thing I would say, that good communicators, one of their superpower is emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, then Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And in the book, he talks about how emotional intelligence is more important than having a higher IQ. Steve Jobs had a very high emotional intelligence. He understood what people want.
Yeah.
Getting back to the Dale Carnegie thing, if you have this emotional intelligence, and I think a lot of people who are successful have emotional intelligence. A lot of people think it's BS too, but I don't.
I've definitely found that the most successful people are also typically the most easy to approach,
Right.
the most easy to, it just almost uniformly.
Yes. Yeah. I have a sign over my desk. I'll tone it down for your listeners. It says, "Don't believe your own BS."
Yeah.
You can tell people, "Oh, I have 40 books. I got the classes. I did this." People don't want to. People. There's another. I love all these expressions. One is people want to know how much you care before they care how much you know. And on a workshop, that's one thing I always keep in mind. They don't care, if I know how to, well, they care if I know how to use a neutral density filter and they want me to help them. But if they leave there saying, "Hey, that guy really cared about me. He really cared whether or not I had a good time, whether I learned a lot."
Sure. Well, I mean, that makes sense. They signed up for a workshop with you, and so they know all the technical sort of things.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't have signed up for a workshop. So the rest of it is really your emotional IQ, and
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a good read. Emotional Intelligence is a very good book. I've read a lot of books on psychology, and that was that's not really a psychology book, but
I look forward to reading your superpower book. I think that's going to be just absolutely fantastic.
yeah, I'll send you the PDF. It's and for your listeners, by the way, phototherapy and this, I published them myself with the help of my friend Chad Robertson on Amazon. They're only available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. And the cool thing for your listeners, you cut out the middleman.
Oh, that's a good point.
You don't have a publisher. You're the publisher. Plus, you could check every day on your sales. You could help promote it. And actually, my friend Chad Robertson, he heads up this company called Writing Nights. Like if you're writing at night, typing at night, writingnights.org. And he gives free 15-minute consultations. So any of your listeners who have an idea for a book, you send him, you talk to him. If you want to do a book, you send him the stuff. In a month, you'll be up on Amazon.
Wow, that's fantastic. And that's writingnights.com.
Writingnights.org.
.org. Awesome.
Yeah, writingnights.org. So again, if you're writing at night. And if people want advice also on writing books, I'm happy to help after writing 41 books.
I think you've got it down pat by this point.
Yeah, I think so. It's a lot of writing's very therapeutic because you especially for a neurotic person, because you can sit there all day and talk to yourself.
Well, and photography is storytelling, and writing a book is storytelling.
Well, getting back to that, with every paragraph I write, my number one tip in writing a book is respect the reader. Know the audience and then respect the reader. Like, I don't use, bad language or anything like that, but if I was a different writer and I wanted to write a shocking novel, filled with, suspense, drama, tension, my books don't have any of that. So knowing your audience and respecting the reader is so very, very important.
That's very good advice. It's awesome. I love that. So wrapping up here, Rick, real quick, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's just picking up a camera for the first time, what would it be?
I would say follow your heart. And don't judge your pictures on someone else's pictures, which is one reason why phototherapy has no pictures. Like, I have a picture that I'm looking at on my screen right now. Anyone looking at it, if I published it, would say it's a picture of a mommy owl and a baby owl, a white, the white owlet, I guess you call them. Mm-hmm. In the tree in my driveway. The mommy's face is half covered, and it's busy, and the exposure's not great. But I'll tell you what, when I took this picture, I could not wait. I could not wait to share this picture with my wife and my son and his girlfriend who's living here now because of the virus situation. Both their colleges are closed. Both their schools are closed. So to me, this is the story is we looked for the owl for 2 months.
Oh.
2 months. We heard it at night. We heard it at night and in the early morning. And we heard it, and we couldn't find it. And the day I found it, I was so excited. So a picture doesn't have to have, great depth of field or shallow depth of field or follow the rule of odds, which is an odd number of subjects in the photograph. It doesn't have to have great color. It's really what it means to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I would say, follow the work, try to steal like an artist, of course, follow the work of the famous painters and famous photographers, but also, think about what your photography means to you. And that will really, I think, help you become a great or a better photographer. Same thing with music, right? Look at all these musicians who are doing something different. Or Picasso, if he didn't break out of this traditional stuff and do his cubism paintings, where he had all the, the faces were all like cubes, like out of the Bizarro world in the Superman comics that I used to read in the '60s, he would have just done what everyone else is doing. So
Right.
I would say follow your heart.
That is just great advice. So, Rick, tell me where people can find you.
Yep, Rick Sammon, Sammon. Sounds like the fish, but it's Sammon. RickSammon.com. And we also have a phototherapy, a Facebook group. So people could just go on Facebook and look for phototherapy. And that's a fun group where people are sharing pictures that mean stuff to them. And we have no political or no political posts. I learned early on the workshops, the first thing, the second thing I would say to people is no talk about guns, religion, or politics.
That's very good advice on a workshop.
Right? Because we have enough in common.
Yeah. Everyone's coming there for the same reason.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, yeah, you did a great job. One of my favorite expressions is that the camera looks both ways, meaning in picturing the subject, you're also picturing a part of yourself, meaning your mood, your emotion, your feeling is reflected in the photograph. So you did a great job. The microphone sounds both ways, and you look good on camera too. So
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
yeah, too bad. This is audio only, right?
Audio only, yeah.
Yeah, so your listeners can't see your blue eyes. So it's too bad.
Well, I use a very bright white screen, so I get good light in my eyes.
Yeah, well, I have the same thing here. I have light reflected into a big whiteboard here.
Did you enjoy this episode of the Adapted Lens podcast? If so, please consider subscribing. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and consider supporting the Adapted Lens on Patreon. And until next time, thanks for listening.